And with that, let's move on to this last news story. About PlayStation. Sony is experimenting with AI-powered PlayStation characters. This is from The Verge, written by Tom Warren. Sony is working on a prototype AI-powered version of at least one of its PlayStation game characters. An anonymous tipster has shared an internal video from Sony's PlayStation Group with The Verge that demonstrates an AI-powered version of Aloy from Horizon Forbidden West. After we published the story, the video was pulled from YouTube due to a copyright claim from Muso, a copyrights enforcement company which advertises Sony Interactive Entertainment as a client. The video is narrated by Sharwin Raghobardajal, director of software engineering at Sony Interactive Entertainment, who works on video game technology, AI, computer vision, and face technology for Sony's PlayStation Studios Advanced Technology Group. We watched, I'm going to call him Sharwin. I'm not going to call him by his last name. I'm sorry.
Fair.
Or them. I guess I don't know if it's a he or she. We watched Sharwin demonstrate an AI-powered version of Aloy that can hold a conversation with a player through voice prompts during gameplay. Aloy could be seen responding to queries with an AI-powered synthesized voice and facial movements, both on a demo setting and within the full Horizon Forbidden West game. Sharwin makes it clear this is just a prototype that has been developed alongside Guerrilla Games to demonstrate the technology internally at Sony. The technology demo used OpenAI's Whisper for speech-to-text and both GPT-4 and Llama 3 for conversations and decision-making. Sony has its own internal emotional voice synthesis system that it uses for speech generation, according to Sharwin, and audio-to-face animation is powered by Sony's own Mockingbird technology. While the demo is seen running on PC, Sony has also experimented with running parts of this technology directly on PS5 consoles with little overhead, according to Sharwin. Sony first demonstrated this internally a year ago before showing a more advanced version behind closed doors at its Sony Technology Exchange Fair in Tokyo in November. This is just a glimpse of what is possible, says Sharwin. This tech demo doesn't answer the more obvious questions over whether it even makes sense to talk to Aloy when you're supposed to be playing as her in Horizon Forbidden West, or the impact such technology could have on voice actors and game developers. NVIDIA has been working on its own similar technology for AI-powered NPCs in games where you speak freely to video game characters. ACE, as NVIDIA calls it, has been demonstrated several times throughout 2024, and the GPU maker has even worked with in-world AI to create Covert Protocol, a playable tech demo of NVIDIA's AI game technology. Microsoft has also been partnering close with in-world AI to eventually bring AI characters to Xbox, allowing game developers to use generative AI character storylines and more. Microsoft has also created its own Muse AI model that generates gameplay, designed initially for game developers to create a game environment for prototyping and ideating. There is already a lot of fear among game developers and studios about how AI could impact the creative process of making video games, particularly when so many layoffs are impacting the games industry. Almost half, 49% of 3,000 respondents to Game Developers Conference 2024 survey said that generative AI tools are currently being used in their workplace, with 31% saying they personally use them. Sony's experiments with AI-powered PlayStation characters are bound to generate more conversations around the role of AI in video game creation just ahead of GDC next week. That's this week now in San Francisco. We reached out multiple times to Sony for a comment in this leaked internal video, but the company didn't respond. We've asked again to confirm whether Sony pulled the video and if it has further comment. Hoo-wee. So a lot to unpack there. Wild to me. Like, this is something that I was reading somewhere and I kind of chuckled is a game all about how AI basically destroyed the world. AI was like caused the end of the world, the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Is being used to demo AI AI generated characters. Wild to me. Like, that's the whole thing with Horizon. I guess spoilers for Horizon, the Horizon games.
Yeah.
It is a post-apocalyptic future, and all brought on by AI, and now they're using the main character of that game to power their AI, or using their AI to power Aloy from the game. It's like, wow, how backwards is that? That seems wild. Oh man. But this is this whole thing is, I don't know, scary, sad, weird. Like, I don't know, the technology is cool. Don't get me wrong. Like, from a tech point of view, like, this all sounds sick. But then when you think about the actual real impact and implications of this, it's not great. I don't know. You sent me a video earlier from Ashley Birch on TikTok, right? Do you want to talk about that? Did you watch that?
I did, yeah. She kind of talked about this thing, or this leaked video, and her thoughts on it were basically she checked in with Gorilla, and they did not use her voice or likeness to train this AI. It was used different stuff to make it happen. And she talked about it and was kind of talking about the SAG strike that's happening right now to try to get any sort of protections and common sense protections for AI, or for/against AI for actors and video game performers, so that they, can't have their likeness used without permission, that they get proper compensation for the work that they do, and so forth.
Yeah.
And she kind of basically, the gist of it was like, yeah, this is like potentially neat and stuff like that, but like, what are we, if this continues and is used in potentially like helpful ways, like what do we lose out on, or do we just like lose the idea of a video game performer and actor/actress in general? And I think I'm personally not a very big fan of AI at all, and I do feel very like heavily that it's not helpful to, like, it can be neat for sure, but like I think it causes more harm than good as far as creating things. And I think yeah, especially as like we talk about like poor performances in video games, like that happens, that question and topic comes up every once in a while, and it's just like, why would we want to have basically not great, as AI is pretty consistently shown to not be like top tier, top high quality work done? Why would we want to make our video games worse by having non-real people acting in them?
Right. Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's like one of those things where it just, I don't know. AI has its uses. In general, I'm not a fan of AI, but there's a few times where it's like, okay, that's extremely handy. Like they're like at work to see just today. They needed me to do something a little different than my normal job. They're like, hey, you know how to do graphic design, right? I'm like, yeah. They're like, we need you to make a flyer for something. I'm like, all right, cool. One of the guys is going on a trip overseas to some conference that's going on that we need to hand out flyers and brochures and stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. I'd like designed this whole thing. But then I was just trying to figure out like the text to put on there. And they're like, oh, well, we have this old flyer. We don't really like it. But some of the text on there is good. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So again, and I was just like, okay, well, like some of the stuff I'm not familiar with, I'm newer to the company still, only been there 6 months, and I'm mostly just focused on my own project. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'm going to take, basically I fire up ChatGPT and I was like, hey, scan this document and I want you to like give me a good, paragraph or like a couple good a good heading for me to put on the front of a trifold brochure. And I was like, okay. And then boom, spit it out. And I was like, this is great. This is fantastic. But the content was already written up by someone else who like wrote it and knew what they were talking about. And it basically just kind of like configured it,
rephrased it,
and then just spit it out into like a more succinct version. So that way, instead of being like an entire page worth of content, it was just like 2 sentences so I could put on a little fly or whatever. I'm like, that was fantastic. That was so much better than me having to sit there and read it and try to understand it and break it down, like what's important and what's not, because I didn't want to have to keep bothering my boss and being like, hey, what about this? What about that? You know? So when I took it to him too, he's like, oh, this is amazing. I'm like, yeah, cool. Yeah, good. So like with that kind of stuff, AI is amazing, but most of the work was already done. Like, and I've used AI in the past where it's like, okay, I have an idea and I'll write like a freaking novel into ChatGPT. So I'm doing all the work and I just need them to like almost like check it for me. Like, hey, just check it, or hey, can you just add a little extra oomph to it or something? That's like, okay, boom, and it just does it, and it's like so freaking handy. But what this is talking about is like full on 100% just characters being AI powered, which like essentially cutting out the whole like soul of the character. Like, even if it's like, I know it costs time and money and all these things to like hire, because I'm sure I want to clarify this. What I'm assuming this is going to be used for is like NPCs and stuff, kind of like what NVIDIA is using it for. I couldn't imagine a main character ever being AI powered. I don't think that'll ever happen. But as far as like NPCs that you can interact with in the world and stuff, man, like there's a whole market of voice actors out there. Like that's how they survive, is these gigs. Like, yeah, they only have like 3 lines, but you know what? They do those 3 lines great, and they keep getting hired to do more NPC work and more games because they have great voices for NPCs, you know. And then eventually, you know, they move up the rung, and then they're able to maybe become a main character one day. You know, you got to start somewhere. But it's like doing this kind of cuts out that whole market where it's like, okay, well, how are you ever going to discover new talent when you don't have these like kind of lower positions, because it's all just being filled by AI? And eventually these current voice actors move on, whatever, maybe they, you know, retire or quit doing it or whatever the case might be. And then like there's no one to replace them. So then main characters do get just replaced by AI and stuff. Like, I don't know. It's just like the domino effect. You got to think like long term with this, or even if that doesn't happen, you know, okay, maybe everything, maybe they do just start replacing, I don't know, at like capture performances and stuff with AI generated stuff. Like, I don't know, like you said, like you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like AI stuff is never great. Like it needs a lot of work, you know? And is it really save them that much money when they're having, in my head, I feel like they would have to put more time into perfecting the performance, like a performance capture of an AI versus just a performance capture of an actual person who just knows how to do the thing well, right? You get an expert in there, and who knows how to do whatever, like a backflip or some, or like an emotional scene where it's just like, you know, these people are talking and crying and emoting and all this stuff. But then to like, I don't know, like, okay, you do a couple takes and you get it. With AI, it's like, all right, you get it, but it's not quite right. And if it's close and you got to reconfigure it, I don't know. None of this makes sense. To me, it just seems like it doesn't actually, how could it save them that much money and time? But apparently it does, but at what cost? Like there's always a cost.
I feel like it's very much like a thing of like short-term like benefits and long-term repercussions. Like it will definitely like, it like might be cheaper for you in the like it right now to be like, all right, we're gonna start doing AI NPCs, but then it's like, well, eventually people will look at that and they're like, well, you know, this is a video game that doesn't have like great NPCs, and like no characters that aren't like the main characters are like in any way compelling, and kind of detracts from your story, you know, and just ends up with a generally worse product than what it would have been beforehand if more time and money had been put into it. And like, I think you want your game, people want I think developers want their games to be received well. They want to make good products. And I think more often than not, the thing that I am like scared of or like nervous about in this situation is like people who don't quite understand or get the idea behind like products and like for AAA games of being like, well, we should do this because it's cheaper. And it's like, well, sure, it's cheaper, but it's going to make it worse. And they're like, well, it doesn't really matter how much that it's going to be slightly worse. We're going to make more money by cutting out this cost.
Yeah.
And we end up getting far worse products in the general because things were pushed that shouldn't have been pushed. And then potentially that leads to games not doing well because they're received poorly or they don't have those sort of things. And then we get more studios shut down and so forth, you know?
Yeah. No, it ultimately just, it doesn't add up. And yeah, you hit it right on the head, like short-term, benefits for long-term, it's just destroying the industry even more than it already is. Like that's the thing. Right. It's already in shambles. Yeah. And this is like, almost feels like a final nail in the coffin. It's like, all right, like this is just destroying this beautiful art. Right. And just kind of, I don't know, just so careless, but we'll see. I don't know. I guess I didn't realize that the voice actors were still on strike. For some reason, I feel like I remember us doing an episode where I thought I did an update where like, hey, yeah, like we're able to come to an agreement, but apparently not. Because and Ashley Birch's, her TikTok there, she mentioned that they're still technically striking. I'm like, oh, I had no idea. Because there was even some people I followed on Instagram who they weren't allowed to talk about certain games for a little bit while they were striking. And then after like a few months, I remember them going back to like in their Instagram stories talking about the games and stuff that they had voice acted in and done stuff. So I guess I just assumed they were back on track, but maybe it was like a partial thing where like they kind of like started to come to agreement. Like they came back to the table. So they're not like outright like 100% striking, but they're also still not in agreement. So I don't know. Sad. I couldn't imagine being in that position too. Like, oh, my livelihood is on the line here. Literally being threatened by computers. And I mean, we didn't even talk about like AI being used to actually just replicate people too. Like, and that's what the whole strike is about. Is like, hey, voice actors don't want AI versions of themselves. But like that is like, that's the next step, honestly, unfortunately, is like, okay, first it starts with NPCs, but then pretty soon it's like, well, we don't need to hire Troy Baker. We can just get his likeness. Even if the SAG-AFTRA strike thing goes through, my fear is like, because one of the things that Ashley mentions in her TikTok is like, we're working to get fair compensation for AI likenesses. If they do use us to make an AI version of us, like in a game or something, we want to at least get fairly compensated for it. And in my head, what went through my head is like, if you're not getting the same price you'd be getting if you were standing in that voice booth, like the recording booth, like there shouldn't be any agreement. Like that's what, like, I couldn't imagine like, okay, I don't know how much voice actors get paid, but just bear with me with these fake pretend numbers I'm about to throw out. Pretend like, Troy Baker, they're like, hey, we're going to pay you. We typically pay you $30 an hour to come record in a booth. He's obviously he's getting much more than that, but you get what I'm saying. $30 an hour. And then like all of a sudden they're like, oh, but we're going to use your AI version. We're only going to pay you like 25 or like 23 or something like that. Like, no, like, I'm doing less work, but that's still me, it's still getting my name is on that product. So not only does that represent me and like who I am, but also my name, and a lot of voice actors like this, like my name being on there brings in people who want to, like they see my name and like, oh, I want to play the next Ashley Birch game. I want to play the next Troy Baker game or whoever it is. So it just seems wild to me that it would be like the way she said it almost made it sound like the compensation could be different. I'm like, they should be exactly the same. If they're not getting paid the same amount, as they would be normally, then that should be completely off the table, in my opinion. That seems wild.
I agree.
But
I think also like another thing in that same vein is like, not only is it like these voice actors' name and like likeness and so forth, but it's also like the work that they have done. Like these like AI programs would be trained on the things that they have done before. It's like, it's, even though it's not things that they're doing like at that moment necessarily, but it is like still the things that they have done before.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah, I don't know. AI, when it's used in its right spot, like, it is great. But I don't know. Overall, it's one of those things where like, man, was it actually worth it? Is this actually good? Is this a good thing? Like, just to have those few tiny, minuscule, like helpful moments. Is it worth having those little like, perks for the, in general, probably broader destruction it's going to cause, essentially?
Yes.
You know, like, does that actually outweigh, one outweigh the other there? But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I guess in a couple of years, if we're living in, it's like friggin' Terminator outside and we're fighting the machines, machine guns, and, fighting Elon Musk, and his Tesla bots, or whatever is happening out there. Guess we'll find out. Thank you so much for watching that clip from our podcast. Remember, if you want to watch the full episode, link will be in the description below. You can click on that and check it out. We got listener questions. We got more news segments. We got what you playing. We got a lot of fun things. So yeah, more than just the news. There's a lot more to the show that you should go check out. So remember, click that link in the description. Check out that full episode.